The sound of ripping fabric echoed across the grand ballroom, louder than the orchestra that had been playing only moments before. Hundreds of wealthy guests froze in horror as a young waitress stood trembling in the center of the luxurious hotel, desperately clutching what remained of her torn uniform. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, but no light could hide the humiliation burning across her face. The CEO's glamorous girlfriend smiled with cruel satisfaction, convinced she had just taught a worthless waitress her place. What she didn't know was that within minutes, a black limousine would arrive outside the hotel carrying the one man capable of changing every life in that ballroom forever. Before this unbelievable story continues, take 1 second to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who still believes kindness matters, and subscribe to the channel if you believe every human being deserves respect regardless of their job. Stories like this remind us that appearances can be deceiving, and compassion is always more valuable than wealth. Grace Sullivan had spent her entire life trying to prove that character mattered more than money. At 24 years old, she possessed a quiet strength that came from years of hardship rather than privilege. Although she had been born into one of America's wealthiest families in New York, almost no one knew her real identity. After her mother passed away from cancer, Grace had begged her billionaire father, Nathan Sullivan, to allow her to experience life without the protection of wealth. She wanted to understand ordinary people, learn humility, and build a future based on her own abilities rather than her famous last name. Reluctantly, Nathan agreed, but only after arranging discreet security that stayed far enough away to let Grace live independently. For nearly a year, Grace worked as a waitress at the luxurious Grand Harbor Hotel in Chicago. Every morning, she greeted customers with warmth, carried heavy trays without complaint, and quietly helped coworkers struggling to pay rent or buy groceries. Many guests barely noticed her existence, while others treated her like invisible furniture. Yet Grace never allowed bitterness to replace kindness. She believed every difficult day was teaching her lessons no business school ever could. Among the hotel's biggest clients was Victor Hayes, the young CEO of one of America's fastest-growing technology companies. Victor was brilliant, ambitious, and admired by investors across the country. Unfortunately, success had slowly surrounded him with people who cared more about status than integrity. Standing beside him at every glamorous event was his girlfriend, Vanessa Brooks, a social media celebrity whose expensive lifestyle depended almost entirely on appearances. Vanessa measured every person by designer clothing, luxury watches, and family wealth. To her, anyone working in customer service simply existed to obey. That evening, the Grand Harbor hosted an exclusive charity gala attended by celebrities, politicians, entrepreneurs, and business leaders from across the United States. Grace had volunteered for the event because another waitress needed the evening off to care for her sick son. She spent hours preparing tables, serving guests, and making sure every detail remained perfect. As the ballroom filled with elegant laughter and expensive perfume, Grace accidentally brushed against Vanessa while carrying a tray of sparkling water. Only a few drops landed on Vanessa's designer handbag, but the reaction exploded far beyond reason. Vanessa's face twisted with rage. She loudly accused Grace of ruining a limited edition handbag worth more than Grace earned in several months. The surrounding guests immediately turned toward the commotion. Grace sincerely apologized and offered to have the bag professionally cleaned at the hotel's expense. Her calm response only fueled Vanessa's anger. Determined to humiliate the waitress publicly, Vanessa grabbed the front of Grace's uniform during the argument. With one violent pull, the fabric ripped apart. Gasps swept through the ballroom as Grace instinctively covered herself, fighting tears while cameras and phones quietly began recording. Some guests looked away in embarrassment. Others whispered. A few laughed nervously. No one stepped forward. Victor watched everything happen. He understood Vanessa had crossed every possible line, yet he hesitated. His silence lasted only seconds, but for Grace those seconds felt endless. She realized that sometimes the deepest wound wasn't caused by cruelty itself, but by good people choosing not to stop it. Grace quietly gathered the torn pieces of her dignity and hurried toward the employee hallway. She locked herself inside a storage room, trying to steady her breathing. Years of discipline kept her from breaking completely, but tears finally escaped as she stared at her reflection. She wasn't crying because of the ruined uniform. She cried because she had once again witnessed how easily wealth could make some people forget another person's humanity. Meanwhile, word of the incident spread through the hotel. Several employees were furious but feared losing their jobs if they confronted powerful guests. The hotel manager apologized privately to Vanessa instead of defending his employee, hoping to protect the hotel's reputation. Outside, rain began falling across downtown Chicago. At almost the same moment, a sleek black limousine stopped at the hotel's entrance. Nathan Sullivan stepped out wearing a simple navy suit without bodyguards surrounding him. Although one of America's richest businessmen, he preferred quiet entrances over dramatic displays. He had unexpectedly decided to surprise his daughter after returning early from an overseas business trip. Grace didn't even know he was back in the country. The smiling concierge welcomed Nathan, immediately recognizing one of the nation's most respected billionaires. Hotel executives rushed forward, assuming he had arrived for the gala. Instead of accepting greetings, Nathan politely asked one question. "Where is my daughter?" Confused faces stared back at him. Within minutes, one nervous employee explained that a waitress named Grace had been involved in an incident. Nathan's expression changed instantly. He walked calmly through the ballroom until he noticed scraps of white fabric still lying near one of the tables. Several guests recognized him and fell silent. Victor's confidence faded the moment he realized the billionaire wasn't attending as a business guest. Nathan found Grace sitting alone backstage wearing a borrowed jacket from another waitress. The moment she saw her father, months of emotional strength collapsed. She embraced him tightly, ashamed that he had witnessed the consequences of her experiment. Nathan gently looked at her torn uniform before quietly asking what had happened. Grace never exaggerated the truth. She explained everything honestly, even admitting the spilled water had been accidental. Nathan listened without interrupting. Then he stood. The calm kindness in his eyes disappeared, replaced by the protective determination only a father could carry. He returned to the ballroom, where every conversation immediately stopped. Nathan didn't shout. He didn't threaten. His quiet voice carried enough authority to silence hundreds of wealthy guests. He explained that true greatness had nothing to do with billion-dollar companies, luxury brands, or famous names. It was revealed that the young waitress everyone ignored was his only daughter, the future heir to the Sullivan family fortune. Yet Nathan made something even more important clear. Grace had never needed his wealth to deserve respect. She deserved dignity simply because she was a human being. Vanessa's face turned pale. Only moments earlier she had proudly mocked Grace's simple uniform. Now she realized she had publicly humiliated the daughter of one of America's most admired philanthropists. Victor felt something even heavier than embarrassment. He recognized that his greatest failure wasn't dating someone cruel. His greatest failure was remaining silent while cruelty happened in front of him. Nathan refused every apology offered out of fear. Instead, he asked the ballroom a simple question. If Grace had truly been only a waitress, would what happened have become acceptable? No one answered, because everyone already knew the truth. Respect should never depend on someone's bank account. The charity gala transformed into something entirely different. Instead of celebrating donations, guests began confronting uncomfortable truths about themselves. Several executives privately apologized to hotel employees they had ignored for years. Staff members who had always remained invisible suddenly found people thanking them for their hard work. Victor publicly accepted responsibility for his silence. He ended his relationship with Vanessa that same evening and later established mandatory workplace dignity programs throughout every company he owned. Promotions inside his businesses would no longer depend only on performance, but also on how employees treated those with less power. Vanessa lost far more than social status. Luxury invitations disappeared. Influential friends quietly distanced themselves. For the first time in her life, she discovered that beauty without kindness quickly loses its value. Grace chose not to seek revenge. Instead, she asked her father to fund scholarships for hospitality workers who dreamed of attending college. Thousands of waiters, housekeepers, cooks, and hotel employees across America eventually received educational opportunities because one young woman refused to allow humiliation to become hatred. Nathan often said his daughter had taught him the greatest lesson of his own life. He had spent decades building companies worth billions of dollars. Yet Grace reminded him that the richest investment anyone could ever make was treating another human being with compassion. Months later, Grace finally accepted a leadership position within her father's foundation. Unlike many wealthy heirs, she understood every employee's daily struggles because she had lived them herself. Whether speaking with janitors, receptionists, executives, or investors, she greeted everyone with exactly the same respect. People often asked why she still kept the torn name badge from her waitress uniform. She smiled every time before answering, because that small piece of metal reminded her that dignity isn't something expensive clothes can provide or cruel words can destroy. It comes from the quiet strength to remain kind when the world gives every reason to become bitter. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories that remind the world why kindness will always matter more than status. Before you leave, tell us in the comments, if you had been standing in that ballroom, would you have defended Grace even if it meant risking your own reputation? The greatest measure of success will never be the size of your fortune, the title on your business card, or the luxury of your lifestyle. It will always be the way you treat people who have nothing to offer you except their humanity. And on that unforgettable night in Chicago, one torn uniform revealed the true character of everyone in the room.